I was standing at my kitchen sink at 6:45 in the morning on a Tuesday in March. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee. The good kind. The kind my husband brings back from that little shop in town where they roast it fresh. I like to drink it from the ceramic mug that says World's Best Grandma on the side. My granddaughter gave it to me for Christmas 3 years ago. I held it with both hands because my hands were cold. The house was quiet. It is always quiet in the morning. 43 years of marriage and I have gotten used to that silence, but it never stops feeling like something is missing. I was looking out the window at the backyard. The fence was still up. The dogwood tree my husband planted the year we moved in was bare and skeletal looking, but I knew it would bloom in a few weeks. I knew a lot of things like that. I kept track of everything. The dogwood, the mail, the neighbors, the price of gas. The things my family did and said. I paid attention because that is what you do when you love people. You pay attention. You remember. You hold it all together. My name is Linda Marie Carter. I am 67 years old. I live in a house on Maple Street in a suburb outside of Charlotte. It is a nice house, 2 stories, brick, a wraparound porch. The kind of house people describe when they say they grew up with nothing and built something. I did build something. I built a life. I raised 3 kids. I worked 31 years at the same grocery store. I kept a garden. I made pies for every church potluck from 1987 to 2019. I loved my husband. I loved my children. I loved the ground they walked on. And now, I sit in this kitchen at 6:45 in the morning with a cup of coffee, and I am trying to figure out how I missed it. How I missed all of it. Let me start from the beginning because you need to understand what I had before you understand what was taken. I met my husband Roy at a 4th of July cookout in 1979. He was tall. He had these big hands. He worked at the textile mill down the road. He was quiet. He did not say much, but when he looked at you, his whole face changed. You felt like you were the only person in the county. I was 22. I had just started working at Piggly Wiggly. I was making $6.25 an hour. I was tired all the time. My mother had died the year before, and my father had drank himself into a hospital, and I was raising my little brother alone. Roy did not know any of that. He just smiled at me and asked if I wanted another beer. I said no because I was working in the morning, but I wanted to say yes. That was the first lie I ever told Roy Carter. The first of many. But that is a different story. We got married in October. It was a small wedding. My friend Doris made the cake. My brother gave me away even though he could barely stand up straight. Roy cried when he saw me coming down the aisle. He did not try to hide it. He just stood there with his eyes red and his jaw tight, and I knew right then that this man was going to be my whole life. And he was. For 43 years, he was my whole life. We had 3 children. First came Danny. Then came Ellen. Then came Becca. Danny was easy. He was quiet like his father. He came home from school and did his homework and went to bed without being asked. Ellen was stubborn. She argued with me about everything. She wanted to be a lawyer. She got a scholarship to UNC. She made something of herself. Then there was Becca. Becca was the baby. Becca was the one who stayed close. Becca lived 10 minutes away. Becca called every Sunday. Becca brought the kids over on Saturdays. Becca was my person, the one I leaned on, the one I trusted most in this world besides Roy. Becca married a man named Greg in 2005. Greg was fine. He was a project manager for a construction company. He was polite. He shook my hand at the wedding and his eyes were wet because he was nervous. Becca loved him. I loved him because Becca loved him. That is how it worked in my family. You love who your children love. You take them in. You feed them. You open the door wider. They had 2 kids. Emma was born in 2007. Jack was born in 2010. I adored those children the way you adore something you did not make but you would die for. Emma was shy. She had my eyes. Jack was loud and funny and he reminded me of Danny. I took care of them. I drove them to school. I picked them up. I made their lunches. I was there for every single thing. I was the one they called when they had nightmares. I was the one who kissed their boo-boos. I was Grandma Linda, and that meant something to me. That meant everything. But I need to tell you about Becca's husband, Greg, too, because he is of this story. Because he was not just polite, He was something else underneath. Greg and I got along. We had barbecues together in the summer. He helped Roy fix the porch railing. He called me Mrs. Carter at first, and then Linda once Emma started crawling and he saw how I held her. He was respectful. He was careful. He never raised his voice. But there was something about him that I could not name. A tightness in his jaw when he thought no one was looking. A quickness in his eyes when money came up. I saw it, but I did not say anything because who am I to judge a man's face? People change. People are not always what they seem. I learned that the hard way. Now here is where the cracks start. In 2018, Roy had a heart attack. It was bad. They flew him to Carolina's medical center, and he was in the ICU for 9 days. I sat in that waiting room with my hands folded and I prayed. Not to God. I just sat there and I thought about every good thing he ever did. The way he held my face in the dark. The way he rubbed my feet when my ankles swelled. The way he said my name like it was the only word he knew. He came home. He was weaker. He needed help. I gave it. That is what you do. That is what I had always done. While Roy was in the hospital, I needed help with the house. Becca offered. She said, "Mom, come stay with us for a while. Let us take care of things." I said, "Okay." I packed a bag. I left the house on Maple Street for the first time in weeks. When I walked in the door of Becca and Greg's house, it smelled like new carpet and fresh paint. They had remodeled the kitchen. New cabinets, new counter, a backsplash. It was beautiful. Greg was sitting at the table eating a bowl of cereal. He looked up and smiled and said, "Hey, Linda." Becca came running from the hallway with Emma on her hip. She said, "Mom, you look tired. Sit down." I sat down. That was the beginning, or maybe it was already happening and I just did not see it. For the next several months, I stayed with them on and off. Roy was recovering. He could not do much. I helped with the kids. I cooked. I cleaned. I drove Emma to dance class and Jack to baseball. I did it because that is what grandmothers do, but I also did it because Becca and Greg were struggling. Greg had changed jobs. His new salary was less. Becca was not working. Emma needed tutoring. Jack needed braces. I could see the stress on their faces. I could see the way Greg would leave the room when Becca brought up money. I could see the way Becca would bite her lip and pretend everything was fine. I wanted to help. I wanted to take the weight off them, so I started giving. I gave money, small amounts at first, 100 here, 200 there. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I had it. I told myself they needed it more than I did. Roy was on disability. Our bills were covered. The house was paid for. I had worked my whole life. I had saved. I had a retirement account and a little set aside in a CD that my father had started before he died. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being a good mother and a good grandmother. I did not know that generosity was a door and someone was already walking through it. Becca started asking for more, not in a greedy way, in a tired way. She would call me on a Tuesday and say, "Mom, I just need $400 for the electric bill. Can you Venmo me?" And I would Venmo her $400. Then she would call on Thursday and say, "Mom, Greg's truck needs new brakes." I said, "Oh, honey." I sent the money. Then it was a dentist bill. Then it was a car payment. Then it was Emma's new school clothes. Then it was a deposit for a storage unit Becca said they needed. I never asked questions. I never looked at the receipts. I just sent the money because my child was hurting and I would rather bleed than watch her struggle. Greg was involved too. Greg would text me, not Becca. Greg. He would say, "Linda, we really appreciate everything you have done. You are a godsend. You are the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for." Those texts made me feel seen. They made me feel important. I held my phone and I read those words and I thought this is what it is supposed to feel like. To be needed, to be loved. But here is what I did not see. Here is the thing I was too trusting to notice. Greg had a second phone. I found out about it later, but at the time I did not know. He had a prepaid phone that he kept in the glove box of his truck. Becca knew about it. She had seen him use it, but she did not say anything. She just watched. I did not watch. I just gave. In early 2019, Roy started getting better. He could walk to the mailbox. He could sit on the porch. He was still weak, but he was home, and that was enough for me. I moved back to Maple Street. I went back to my routines. Coffee at 6:45, garden in the morning, Call Becca at noon, pick up the kids on Saturday. It felt normal. It felt safe, but something shifted. Becca stopped calling as much. She would text instead. Short messages. Let me know, sure mom, thanks. I did not push it. I thought she was busy. I thought raising 2 kids and managing a household was exhausting. I understood exhaustion. I had lived it. Then Roy's health took another turn. He had a second episode. His doctor said he needed to slow down. He could not work anymore. He could barely walk without getting winded. I became his caretaker. I gave up my Saturday mornings with the kids. I gave up the garden. I gave up the church potlucks. I stayed home with Roy and I took care of him, and I did not complain because he took care of me for 43 years and this was my turn. Becca and Greg did not come around as much. They would drop the kids off on Sundays and leave within an hour. Emma would hug me and say, "I miss you, Grandma." Jack would say, "See you next week." And they would be gone. I did not say anything. I just waved and went inside and made lunch for Roy, and we ate together in the quiet kitchen, and I thought, this is fine. This is how it is now. People get busy. People move on. I had moved on too in my own way. I had accepted that my life was smaller now. That was okay. I had done big things. I could do small things, but the money kept going out. Becca would call and say, "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's finances. He is getting worse. What if something happens? We should look into his accounts." I should have power of attorney. I said okay. I signed papers. I gave her access to Roy's bank account. I thought it was practical. I thought it was responsible. A daughter protecting her father. What I did not know was that Greg was the one who suggested it. And what I did not know was what they were going to do with that access. The first time I noticed something was wrong was in November of 2019. I was balancing my checkbook. I always balanced my checkbook. It was a habit from my mother, who balanced everything with a pencil and a calculator and a look on her face like the world was ending. I saw a transfer. $5,000 moved from our joint account to an account I had never seen. The name on the account was G&B Carter, Greg and Becca. I stared at the number. $5,000. I called Becca. She did not answer. I called again. She picked up on the third ring and said, "Mom, I am in the car." "What is it?" I said, "I see a transfer on the account. $5,000. Where did it go?" There was a pause, a long one. Then she said, "Oh, that was for the roof. We needed to fix the roof." I said, "We do not have a roof problem." She said, "Mom, it was an emergency." I said, "When?" She said, "A couple weeks ago." I said, "I did not know about it." She said, "I am sorry, I should have told you." I said, "Okay." I hung up. I did not call back. I should have called back. I should have pushed. But I did not, because I told myself she was my daughter and she would not lie to me. And because $5,000 was a lot, but we had more. We had always had more. I had worked for it. Roy had worked for it. We had earned it. I thought it was just a mistake. I thought she would put it back. She did not put it back. Over the next year, the transfers got bigger. 10,000, 15,000, then 20,000 at once. I would see them on the monthly statement. The numbers blurred together. I would call Becca and she would have an explanation every time. Car trouble, Emma's tuition, Jack's medical bills, a plumbing emergency, a furnace replacement. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because if I did not believe her, then I had to believe something I did not want to believe. That my daughter was taking money from me. That my son-in-law was helping her. That the people I trusted most in this world were lying to my face and stealing from my savings and looking me in the eye every Sunday when they dropped off the kids like nothing was wrong. In 2020, Roy died. COVID was happening, but that is not what killed him. His heart gave out on a Wednesday morning in April. He was sitting in his recliner drinking coffee. The same kind of coffee I drink. The same mug. He set the mug down and he closed his eyes and he was gone. I was holding his hand. I was right there. I felt it go. I felt his hand get cold in mine and I screamed, and the neighbor came over and called 911, but it was too late. He was already gone. I sat in that chair with his hand in mine for a long time. The coffee was still warm. The house was quiet. It was so quiet I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking. I listened to that clock for what felt like hours. I did not move. I did not cry. Not yet. The crying came later. The crying came in waves that hit me at the grocery store and in the shower and in the car in the parking lot of the bank. I cried for Roy. I cried for us. I cried for every year I would not get back. After Roy died, Becca and Greg came over the next day. They brought casseroles and flowers and Emma and Jack. Becca held me and she said, "Mom, I am so sorry. I am right here. I love you." Greg shook my hand and said, "Linda, if there is anything you need, just let us know. Anything at all." I said thank you. I said I am okay. I was not okay. But I said it because that is what you say. Then Becca brought up the finances. She said, "Mom, now that Dad is gone, we really need to consolidate things. Your name is still on the house. Your name is still on the accounts. We should talk about what happens next." I said okay. I was numb. I did not care about money. I cared about Roy. I cared about the hole in my chest where he used to be. I let her guide the conversation. I let her take notes. I let her explain the tax implications and the estate planning and the joint accounts. I nodded. I signed papers. I did not read them. I could not read them. My eyes were full of tears and my hands were shaking, and Becca held my wrist gently and said, "It is okay, Mom. Just initial here. Right there." And I signed. What I signed was a transfer of the house into a trust. The trust was controlled by Becca and Greg. My house. The house on Maple Street that Roy and I bought in 1984. The house where we raised our children. The house where I made Thanksgiving dinner every year with the big table and the mismatched chairs and the smell of turkey and pie. That house was now in a trust controlled by my daughter and her husband. I did not understand what I had signed. I want to say that. I want you to know that. I did not understand. Becca explained it quickly, and she used words I did not follow, and she made it sound reasonable, and I trusted her because she was my baby. My youngest. The one I held when she was born and counted her fingers and her toes and whispered "I love you" into her tiny skull. That was the same woman sitting across from me at my kitchen table taking my house. But I am getting ahead of myself. The real explosion came in February of 2021, 7 months after Roy died. I was going through his things. I had put it off for a long time. I did not want to go into his closet. I did not want to touch his shirts. But I needed to sort it out because the house needed to be cleaned and the kids were coming over, and I could not live in a museum of grief forever. I opened his nightstand drawer. There was a folder in there. A manila folder. Inside were bank statements, not our joint account. A separate account. An account I did not know about. The statements went back 2 years, and on them were transfers. Large transfers. Not from our account to theirs, from a different account. An account in Greg's name alone. The transfers were going to a man named Dale Whitfield. I did not know that name. I had never heard that name. The amounts were between $8,000 and $12,000 per transfer. There were 14 transfers over 2 years. That was over $150,000. I sat on the bed with that folder in my hands and I could not breathe. My chest was tight. My vision was going dark around the edges. I called Becca. She did not answer. I called Greg. He did not answer. I called Becca again. She answered on the 4th ring and she said, "Mom, what is wrong?" I said, "Who is Dale Whitfield?" There was a silence. A long silence. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the kids in the background. Emma asking for a snack. Jack yelling about something. And then Becca said, "Mom, can you come over? Can you come over right now?" I said no. I said, "Tell me." I said, "Right now. Tell me who Dale Whitfield is," and she said it. She said Dale was her boyfriend. She had been seeing him for 2 years. Since before Roy got sick. Since before the money started going out. Greg knew. Greg had set it up. Greg was the one who opened the account. Greg was the one who made the transfers. Greg was the one who told her it was fine. He said, "We deserve this." He said, "Your mother has more than enough." He said, "We have been giving for years, and now it is our turn." And Becca said she knew it was wrong, but she could not stop. She said she was scared. She said she did not know how to tell me. She said she loved me. She said she was sorry. She said all of that on the phone while her children screamed in the background, and I stood in Roy's bedroom holding a folder full of lies, and I said nothing. I could not speak. My mouth was open, but nothing came out. I just stood there. I just stood there in my dead husband's room, and I fell I drove to their house. I did not call ahead. I just drove, 10 minutes. The same 10 minutes I had driven 1,000 times to pick up my grandchildren. The street was the same, the house was the same, the cars were the same. But when I pulled into the driveway, everything looked different. Everything looked like a lie. I got out of the car and I walked to the front door and I did not knock. I just walked in because it was my house too, or it had been. Becca was in the kitchen. Greg was at the table. The kids were in the living room watching something on the television. Becca saw me and her face went white. Greg stood up. I walked up to the table and I put the folder down. I opened it. I spread the statements out. I pointed to the name, Dale Whitfield. I looked at Becca. I looked at Greg, and I said, "You took $150,000 from my husband while he was dying. You took it and you gave it to your girlfriend. You signed over our house. You took everything." And Becca started crying. And Greg stood there with his arms at his sides, and he did not say a word. Not one word, he just stood there. And I looked at him and I saw it. The tightness in his jaw, the quickness in his eyes. The man I had tried to ignore for 15 years. He was standing right in front of me and he was empty. There was nothing behind those eyes. Nothing. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I just stood there and I felt the last piece of my life fall, not crash, fall. Like something dropping from a shelf in slow motion, like watching a glass slide off a table. You can see it going. You can see where it is going. You cannot stop it. I left. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway and I did not go inside. I sat there for 2 hours. The engine was off. The radio was off. I just sat there. My hands were on the steering wheel and my head was down, and I was trying to understand how a person you love can do this to you. How your own child can look you in the eye and empty your life. How the man you welcomed into your family can smile at you and plan your destruction. How you can spend 67 years being good and careful and giving, and it means nothing. It means nothing. The legal took a long time. I hired a lawyer. His name was Paul. He was a family law attorney in town. He looked at the documents and he looked at the statements and he said, "Linda, this is going to be a fight." He said the trust documents were signed under duress. He said the transfers were unauthorized. He said we had a case. But it would take time. It would cost money. And I did not have much left because $150,000 was gone and the house was in a trust I did not control and my retirement was half what it used to be. I fought. I fought because I had to. Not for the money, for the principle, for the idea that love means something. That family means something. That the years I spent making them meals and driving their kids and sitting in waiting rooms at hospitals and folding their laundry meant something. I needed it to mean something. If it did not mean something then, what did any of it mean? The court case lasted 14 months. 14 months of depositions and hearings and lawyers calling each other liars. Becca did not come to any of the hearings. She sent a lawyer. Greg did not come either. His lawyer said he had a scheduling conflict. The judge was patient. The judge was fair. But the judge could not give me back the money. The judge could undo the trust. The judge could order restitution. But the money was gone. Dale Whitfield had spent it. Becca and Greg had spent it. There was nothing left. The house came back to me. The accounts were unfrozen. But the money was just gone, like it had never existed, like I had imagined all of it. When the case was over, I drove to Becca's house one last time. I did not go inside. I parked in the driveway and I sat there and I waited. After about 20 minutes, Becca came out with Emma. They were getting in the car. Emma saw me and she waved. She did not know. She was 9 years old. She did not know what her mother had done. She did not know about Dale. She did not know about the money. She just saw her grandma sitting in the car and she waved and she said, "Bye, Grandma." And I waved back. And I smiled. And then they drove away and I sat there for another hour. Greg moved out 3 months later. I do not know where he went. Becca and the kids stayed in the house on their street. They kept the house. They kept the cars. They kept everything. I kept the empty accounts and the legal bills and the memory of sitting in Roy's bedroom holding a folder that destroyed my life. It has been 2 years since that day. 2 years. I still live on Maple Street. The dogwood bloomed last spring. It had more flowers than I had ever seen on it. I stood on the porch and I looked at it and I thought about Roy. I thought about how he planted it with his own hands on a Saturday in April when the ground was soft and the sky was gray, and he said this tree is going to be here long after we are gone. He was right. The tree is still here. We are not. I talk to Emma sometimes. She calls me on her mom's phone because her mom does not give her her own. Emma asks me how I am. I say I am fine. She says I miss you. I say I miss you too. We talk for a few minutes about school and soccer and the new show she is watching. Then she says, "Okay, Grandma, I have to go," and she hangs up. And the silence comes back. It always comes back. Jack does not call. He is 14 now. He is old enough to understand, but he does not ask questions. I do not know if Becca told him or if he figured it out on his own. Either way, he does not call. I do not blame him. I do not blame any of them. That is what kills me. I do not even have the energy to blame them. I just have this emptiness, this big hollow space where Roy used to be, and where my family used to be, and where I thought I would spend the rest of my life being somebody's person. Some nights I sit in the kitchen, and I drink coffee from the world's best grandma mug, and I look at the clock, and I listen to the house, and I think about how I spent my whole life taking care of people, how I fed them and drove them and held them and worried about them, how I put them first every single day, and how none of it was enough. How none of it protected me from the one thing I never thought would happen, not from a stranger, not from a thief, from my own blood. From the people I would have taken a bullet for. From the people who stood in my kitchen and called me mom and texted me at night saying I love you and meant none of it. I am tired. I am so tired, but I get up every morning. I make coffee. I water the plants. I sit on the porch and I watch the dogwood tree grow. I do these small things because they are all I have left, and some days that is enough. Some days it is not, but I do them anyway, because that is what I do. That is all I know how to do. Love people. Take care of people. Give everything and hope it comes back. It never comes back, not like you want it to, but you keep giving because stopping would mean you agree with them. And I do not agree with them. I will never agree with them. I loved them more than they will ever understand. And that is the saddest thing I know.